On Hooks Newsmaker Saturday starts now.
Thanks for joining us. The city of Phoenix is on the verge of having a very different city council. Local union organizer Betty Guardado won a runoff election for the city's District 5 seat over incumbent appointee Vania Guruata. And civil rights activist Carlos Garcia is Phoenix's new city council member for District 8. He edged out Mike Johnson, a veteran of the council, with 51.5% of the vote, a margin of about 250 votes. We're going to hear from longtime City Councilman Sal DiCiccio in the second part of the program, but let's get started. Pleased to have with us on the program today is newly elected Councilman Carlos Garcia. Good to see you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That was interesting. I mean, you've been with Puente. You were the head of Puente since 2011. You've been kind of on the outside, maybe even as an agitator, a provocateur, a protester, and now you're on the inside. You've got to work with these folks on the inside. How's that transition going to be, Carlos?
I think I feel comfortable in being able to transition well and continue to speak the truth that I've been speaking while we were protesting. And so I feel there was a need, and the folks that were in there weren't doing the things we needed. And so now I get to be on the inside and try to make the shift from in there.
And when you decided to run, there was always the possibility that you could be appointed for that seat, but you didn't want to do that. Why?
I think it was important not to owe anyone anything. I think when you come into politics, it's important to have the people's interest in mind. And so there was an ability to win out the election by the voters, or like others took the opportunity to maybe be appointed. I did not want to owe the other 7 district council officers any favors.
So you wanted to run on your own merits, on your own rights, and not get kind of thrown into that thing. At that point, though, were you thinking, I am going to run when the seat comes up?
Yes. So by then we had already filed our committee. We had already put up our website, but I thought it was important. It was a big risk because it's really hard to beat an incumbent. But we were willing to take that risk because we wanted to go in there genuinely and with a fresh slate, not owing anyone.
Your entire story is very interesting. You came here, immigrated from Mexico when you were 5 years old.
That's correct.
Do you remember that journey?
I do. I do remember that journey. I remember getting here and not knowing English, and unfortunately, it reminds me a lot of what we're seeing with the children that are arriving in the last couple of months that we've seen, released on the Greyhound. I came as 5 years old. I wasn't able to obtain my documents until my teenage years, but I remember that struggle and I hold that struggle, and it's part of the work I've done.
So it is the underpinnings of a lot of where you are on issues.
Yes, of course. I think it's where we're rooted, is where we come from that's important, and growing up as a single child with a single mother, I think that I bring all that with me to the council.
Let me, I want to go to tape 1 here. This is Sam Stone, Sal DiCiccio, who we're going to hear from later in the program, his chief of staff, talking about these drops at the bus station, the Greyhound bus station, of migrants from Central America. Take a listen.
You're essentially creating an entire new class of homeless people right here in Phoenix. And as a city, we don't have the resources to deal with the homeless problem we already have.
He's saying that you're creating just another layer of homelessness with these migrant drops at the bus stop in Phoenix. How do you see that entire situation?
I think he's wrong. I think there's an ability for this city, the 5th largest city in the country, to both take care of our homeless population and make sure that we're a welcoming city for everyone. The people being dropped off at the Greyhound station have already cleared their first interview and they're here to seek asylum. We have an opportunity as Phoenicians to welcome them and make sure they go on the right path while they're in this country.
Is there any evidence that we're being overburdened in social services between the homeless and the migrants who are now here, that we can't handle all this?
Not at all. I think this is the year that Phoenix has raised more money than ever. We're going to have a good amount of money to set aside. I think we need to be able to use these funds properly. And if these are potentially good, productive members of this society, we should take care of them, just like we should invest more in making sure we deal with the homeless population.
You kind of cut your teeth with, as executive director of Puente, you were with the group for, I think, since 07, and then became the chairman in 11. Part of your deal back then was protesting Joe Arpaio. He was a real focus of your efforts. Let me take you back. This was during one of Arpaio's court hearings. This is you outside of, I believe, federal court.
Arpaio was not only doing these raids
for the people he was picking up and criminalizing them, detaining them and deporting them. But he was creating this attrition thought to make our lives miserable that we self-deport, to create fear in our families.
You still today, even in this interview, you wear your Puente shirt. Tell me why.
It's part of who I am. I think I'm proud, and I will continue to be a part of the Puente work. I think what I said there is important in that we're coming into this era, because I spent the majority of that time kind of playing defense or fighting off negative things that were coming from Arpaio. I'm looking forward to taking this step and start to build a future for my children who are being raised in District 8.
One of the things I've always noted about you that has really struck me, and I don't know you well, but I've covered you over the years, is your manner. You never get agitated, raise your voice. You stay very calm, no matter what the issue is. That must serve you well going into a city council where there's going to be some division. There's going to be some tension there, right?
Yeah, I think being raised, and again, I'm not supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to be part of Puente or help start that organization or be a city council person or maybe even have graduated high school or college. But I think what's important is why these things happened, that I have the privilege. And so with me, I carry the responsibility of supporting people like myself, friends of mine, family members that might have gotten deported or didn't make it, ended up in jail or so forth. And so to me, because there's a bigger purpose, because there's the value of my family, that's how I carry myself.
How important was it for you to go through the process of becoming a U.S. citizen?
It was important because that's how I could contribute, right? You can vote, you could be part of society, and eventually, like you see me now, run for office. It was also important because I didn't want my family members to worry whether I was going to be deported or not.
Do you feel with the immigrants coming here, most of them want to become U.S. citizens, or would many prefer to just work and be able to come and go? In Mexico, yes. In Central America, obviously, it's much more complicated.
I think giving people the option is what we need to do. If people want to come here, contribute, and work, and head back home, I think some people might want to do that. Mexico or other countries are beautiful places, and people like being where they're from. What we've done with these immigration laws and tightening of the border is we've actually forced people to stay here. And so I think being able to figure out a solution, those that want to stay, they can stay. Those that want to leave can go back.
Let's look at tape number 3. I want to go through this. This is an interesting issue right now, this light rail, and it runs right in your district, in District 8, which, by the way, for those of you who may not know, District 8 is basically Levine, South Phoenix, up to Thomas, east of the 51. Is that roughly it?
Around 48th Street.
48th Street. So you've got this extension that's being proposed right down into your neighborhood. This is Matt Galka taking a look at that issue.
It was a big day for supporters and opponents of the Light Rail Friday for two different reasons. First, the city of Phoenix got closer to getting more than $500 million from the federal government for the Light Rail extension project into South Phoenix on Central Avenue. We reached Valley Metro CEO Scott Smith by phone.
There's a lot of money involved, and what they've told us is that we're doing the right things, we're making the right progress, and we're moving in the right direction.
On the other side, a judge ruled Friday that a ballot initiative slated for August can proceed. The ruling said the group Building a Better Phoenix did not violate signature gathering laws. That ballot initiative asks voters to kill all future light rail projects, including the one in South Phoenix.
We're going to support any chance to kill the light rail. We're going to take any chance because the light rail, it's a pet project for a little group. It's a corruption.
Business owner Celia Contreras doesn't support Building a Better Phoenix, but she's also been against the light rail and the project since day one. She's worried construction would kill her business, but she wants money earmarked for the project to stay in South Phoenix.
They tried to make Arizona like California. They increase the taxes for all kind of projects that they don't worth it.
Both sides are digging in their heels for August.
3 years constructions with limited traffic, with mess every way, barricades. Nobody wants to come to my business.
It's attracted over $11 billion in real estate investment, 35,000 new jobs. It's been a success by any measure, and we believe that it's an integral part of a comprehensive transportation plan that includes freeways, streets.
Carlos Garcia is a newly elected representative for District 8, Phoenix City Council. Do you favor light rail?
I favor light rail done in the right way. What we saw in the South Central Extension is that community wasn't involved in that process. And Celia, who was on the clip, is a single mother of 3 who's got an amazing story. Her kids are ready for college.
Really liked her.
And so she's going to be impacted. I think we could have taken care of her, people like her, and making sure that it's the right investment for South Phoenix.
Can that extension work in South Phoenix?
That extension needs a lot of support for it to work. Unfortunately, my feeling is that this extension was built for future residents of that place. In Phoenix, we're yet to understand gentrification and the causes and impacts it can have. Unfortunately, if we don't set parameters to this extension, it's going to lead to the people that live in South Phoenix to be displaced and other people moving in.
We've got a minute. Let's go 30 seconds on the police shootings. You called it a crisis, but there were 44 police shootings in Phoenix. We're at, I think, 7 so far this year. Is it a crisis if it just was an aberration, that number in 2018 just was an outlier?
We're at 8 this year, and all 8 have been fatalities. And so I think it is a crisis. I think 1 is too many. You've seen cities like Oakland been able to go from the situation with Oscar Grant to 0 shootings. I think we could get there. I think we need to make sure to address this issue as soon as possible.
The homeless issue.
The homeless issue needs to be invested in. We need to take care of our people. As a city, we can start off earlier on. We have the utilities, the water utility. We know when people are getting into hard times. We need to do more preemption work and make sure we take care of the people in the streets.
The drug addiction on the street, do you think that's fixable?
It's fixable, but we need to invest in it. We need treatment centers and we need places for people to recuperate. They need jobs, they need housing. We need to invest in those folks. They're part of us and we need to look at them with humanity.
Carlos Garcia, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Newly minted city councilman for the city of Phoenix. Thank you for coming on the program. And when we come back, longtime city councilman with a very different view of where the city's going, Sal DiCiccio. He's my next guest on Newsmaker Saturday. Back on Newsmaker Saturday with the man with a very different view of where the city of Phoenix is. Veteran City Councilman Sal DiCiccio, elected in 2009, 2013, and before that had another stint, 94 and 98. Good to see you.
You too, John. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you
on.
Carlos, we just spoke to, he really thinks that the city needs to spend more to keep up with what is needed. What's your take on that?
Well, we need different priorities. We need to get our roads done, that's for sure. They're a disaster and they're embarrassment and they're a danger. But what we need to do is reprioritize the monies that we have right now, John. That's really what we need to do. The city of Phoenix has more revenue now than it's ever had in its history, and we still have less services. It's because the city of Phoenix is literally eating up all those monies themselves. I mean, people are taking it themselves. Our average cost per employee is about $115,000 per employee now.
This is health benefits,
everything,
retirement,
all in,
everything.
All in. So what's happening is we have a structural deficit in the city of Phoenix that no one sees. It's being masked by a good economy. That good economy, once the world changes, is going to come down hard on us.
And it changed in 09. We saw it all exposed in 09, 10, 11.
Exactly.
You were there.
Exactly. It doesn't take much to look back just a few years. So
how much is pension?
It's significant. It's about 35% now of the entire budget is going to go toward pension costs, retirement costs.
So you're paying a workforce that no longer works, and you're paying the current workforce you have.
And we're going to continue to pay them. And so what's happening, that structure that we have within the city of Phoenix is going to eventually fail. If you look at Detroit, you look at Chicago, Illinois, we are on the same path. We're just on a different timeline. We have a much stronger economy. So the strong economy is masking all the things that are happening behind the scenes that are bad. And once the economy changes, which I hope to God it doesn't, because I think it's good for our, for all our citizens to have a strong economy. But if, heaven forbid, it starts to change again, all those negative things are going to come back in a very bad way.
So more services cut.
Oh yeah.
And then water rates in the city of Phoenix have climbed. This is like a end-run tax.
It's exactly what it is. It's a water tax. And it's just all part of the system. That's why you're seeing the nickeling and diming of the public. We're collecting more tax revenue now than we ever have in our history. We're seeing water rate increases go up. It's a nickel and diming. So they're taking $5 here, $15 there, $20 there, and all these things are adding up.
Okay, let's get into police here for a minute. We had 11 Phoenix police officers whose Facebook posts included in a database of what were considered offensive posts by a group called Plainview Project. They're saying, and then there were 97 cops whose posts were included in the database, found many officers who made offensive posts on Facebook have also been named in lawsuits alleging death or serious injury at the hands of police. Now, this is 97 out of 2,900 officers. Do you think this is overblown, or is this a genuine, real concern?
It is way overblown. We have an amazing police department, and they're constantly being criticized. Almost every single week we have the anti-police group coming out there calling them murderers. They call them rapists. They call them Nazis. They're being called everything in the book. So let's take a look at this group. This group is a group of lawyers out of Philadelphia. I believe that they're going to eventually want to sue the city of Phoenix. That's where they're getting.
You think it's a pretext for a lawsuit?
I do. That's why they're doing this. I believe that way. I don't have any facts or information, but I believe that I've been around long enough to know this is how they do it. So this is what they do. So, but at the end of the day, let's look at what they did. So they took 3,000 police officers, current ones, and 1,000 retirees, and they went back about 10 years. So they were able to pull out 1 or 2 messages. So my message would be this, is that the police officers do an amazing job. They're incredible. We ought to be thanking them every day for what they do. We ought to really be thanking them. Instead, they're constantly being criticized. I don't know how they do their job. People look at politicians, nothing happens to us, paper cut maybe. To them, they risk their lives protecting us. 2, if I were a police officer, I'd get it off Facebook. They have a constitutional right, they do, to be there, but realistically, the world that we're in today is so negative and is so bad.
Do you think the chief has done the right thing to take a pause on the people who've had questionable posts?
I think that's fair.
To just try to get to the bottom of where they're coming from, and that you don't have a police force that's got some people who've got bias.
I think it's fair to do that. I just don't want to stigmatize those individuals. Yeah. We all do. And there's a difference between political speech. They've criticized me. They've criticized others. They've criticized the council for that. They've even criticized the president. They showed the president they consider this hate speech, right? This group did. So
it was a picture of the president
wearing a wig, saying he's decided to change his gender today. You know, I know, and then
that's hate speech.
That they did. I know they consider that. That's all part of this entire list of all the things that they had. Now, some of those there were anti-Islamic things that I saw in there too myself that I didn't like. Very troubling. But when you go outside of that, you have to differentiate between political speech. What I'm afraid of is using these individuals as scapegoats to say, oh, we've done something, when in fact they've done nothing.
What do you think, what did you make of the study on the the OIS, pardon me, officer-involved shootings? There's Kate, I believe that, is that Kate there?
Yeah.
My monitor's a ways away and my eyes are failing me.
We're all getting older.
That's right. They looked at this, and I said to the chief when she was on about 6 months ago, I said, you know, I'm not going to be your defender here, but you can have, I hate to say this, it sounds callous, you can have a bad year.
Yeah.
This year, officer-involved shootings are way, way down from a year ago. You can statistically have an outlier, and I don't think you can draw rash conclusions from 1 year of a lot of police shootings.
Well, it's really simple. You pull out a gun on a police officer, they're going to shoot you. It's not that complicated, and that's what we saw with, if you look at the report that was out there, a lot of those individuals, a lot of them, if not all of them, had instigated a confrontational situation with a police officer. Now, there's some things we can be doing today. We are so short police officers that if you put 2 police officers in a car in some of these hot zones, then the police officer doesn't feel as intimidated.
Do we have the police officers to do that?
No, we do not.
Why are we having so much trouble finding police officers?
I think we're having problems with everything right now when it comes to funding the right things and getting things done, like whether our roads, police officers,
this
all
gets
those
back
things.
to the pension issue?
It gets back to the fact, yes, we have a structural deficit that people are not seeing. We have the monies to be able to hire them. I mean, everyone's trying to hire police officers right now. That's for sure. But we create an environment that's morally that's bad for their morale. What makes someone want to be a police officer today? Think about it. Look who you're dealing with. Everything is a negative situation. Everything is a negative. How many times do you walk out and people come up to you and say, hey, thank you? They don't do that. It's always a negative situation that they're involved in. We don't understand that.
Now, fire has a different situation. Phoenix Fire, you know, they are the heroes. Everybody looks to them. Everybody loves firefighters. But there is a pension drain there as well. Do we need as many firefighters? I keep hearing we need more and more firefighters, and I'm not exactly sure why. I've got to be honest. Most of the work is not fighting fires, it's medical calls.
Exactly.
Would there be a way for the city to start to pare this down and privatize some of this stuff?
I've looked at this. So here's what it is. Less than 10% of all our calls go toward fire-related calls. And that includes a garbage can fire versus a large industrial fire. Those 10%, almost all of them are medical-related calls that are out there. But we still send these big trucks. We send out all these individuals when all we need on those there, we could hire a doctor to go on every one of these calls. And that's the way we ought to be looking at this. I sent a message.
Is anybody looking at this?
I tried to get us to do that. Matter of fact, in one of the last meetings we had at the council, I said, look, we have to be redesigning what we're looking at right now. If most of our calls are medical, then we have to gear our operations toward medical calls. If it's not fire, we can always have one or two large engines.
This is what the military did. They went to smaller strike forces.
Yep.
You don't need to roll
the
8th Infantry on everything, right?
It's exactly true. So the political power that they have is shocking. So we need to be making these restructuring today because we really ought to be adapting to the needs of the public. You know, there's some places in our city that don't even have an ambulance.
Okay, and can this conversation be had in a rational way without it being seen as some attack on firefighters? I think, you know, they work for the city, they work for the taxpayer in the bottom line. Isn't this something we're supposed to look at to say, is there a better way to do this for everybody involved?
Yes, there is. But what ends up happening is everyone sees it as an attack. I'm not talking about getting rid of people. I'm just talking about changing job positions so that it becomes more medically oriented toward whatever it is we're dealing with that day.
Could that save the city a lot of money? Do we know how much it might save?
I think it'll save lives too. Not only will it save money, but I believe it'll save lives if we have those types of strike forces that can go out there and adapt to that. These large engines that we pay for, these capital costs, we need them. Okay, without a doubt we need them. But we don't need that many of them. All we need is a situation where they can address a problem in an area.
I've got to ask you about the homeless situation in
Phoenix. I'll tell you more about that.
Okay,
that's even more controversial.
What do you think is going on? What we keep hearing is it's a lack of affordable housing. It's a lack of affordable housing. But I've got to be honest with you, Councilman, the people I see on the street, many of them I don't think are truly employable. I don't think even if they had a job, they could keep a job. So giving them a place to live, I don't know what that's going to accomplish. It sounds hard-hearted, but I'm being honest.
Well, I'm going to be even more direct. That's going to be even more controversial. So we're looking at this. Every year I take on one big issue to try to solve. You know what I mean? It's like I come up with a paper. I've written a paper about how government works. And it's pretty shocking when people read it because it shows that Republicans and Democrats really have the same ideas. It's just the way the structure is put in place to save them. So let's take the homeless. You know, not the majority, at least 30%, 20 to 30%.
We got about a minute and a half just to give you a heads up.
Are mentally incompetent to be able to take care of their own lives. They need to be institutionalized. We need to go back to that because putting them out in the street is not doing them any favors, nor is it doing anybody else any favors. I know. We need to go back to the old model that worked. If you look at Seattle, San Francisco, they don't work. They're literally setting up encampments.
I think it's pretty clear it's failing.
It's not working.
You're pushing for this.
I'm going to be pushing for it probably around August or September
Stand by for the civil libertarians on this because that's going to be very controversial.
Well, they're not competent enough to be able to make their own decisions to sleep on the street. What makes you think that they can take care of themselves?
I think we've got about 40 seconds left. Is light rail going to get defeated in August? Do you think people have looked at this and said, you know what, let's put the money into cars and roads?
It needs to go into our roads. Our roads are a danger right now, an embarrassment. So what's going to happen is the light rail industry itself is going to pour in millions of dollars, and then you've got citizens on the other end. It's going to be a tough road. I don't know if it passes or it doesn't, but at the end of the day, it needs to. Otherwise, we're not going to have any money to fix our roads.
You think we're getting into a shift where this driverless technology and all this will take over? Going back to the 1800s and rail, hard steel in the ground, doesn't make sense.
It's ridiculous. Your transportation model and your system is now in your hand.
Thank you.
Your phone.
Thank you, Councilman. We appreciate it.
Thank
Sal
you,
DiCiccio.
Sal. Just call me Sal.
Sal, good to see you again. Yeah. And we'll be back in a moment on Newsmaker Saturday. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Special thanks to our guests this week on Newsmaker Saturday, Carlos Garcia, the new city councilman for the city of Phoenix, and Sal DiCiccio. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Saturday, and a reminder, you can reach me on Facebook or Twitter John Hook, Fox 10. It's very easy. I'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Saturday.